Much. So I want to welcome you all to an amazing conversation with Rachel Bitecofer. We are incredibly fortunate to have you join us here this morning, and amazingly fortunate to have you also focusing on Arizona. As an introduction, I just want to quote your bio. Ad slinger for hire, political branding strategist. I am the Lorax and I speak for democracy. And you most certainly do. So Rachel Bitecofer is regularly featured in outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Salon, Politico, MSNBC, too many others to name. Rachel's spirited style of analysis turns complex concepts and wonky data into digestible, entertaining narratives political novices not only can follow, but will enjoy. So building off her innovative election work, which successfully predicted the outcomes of the 2018 and 2020 cycles months in advance, Rachel Bitecofer has a unique set of indicators that she tracks to measure competition, and she says they are sending clear signals about what to expect in 2022. And to quote her, she said, "Under my model, Democrats will win the White House in 2020, and then in 2022 they're going to have a very tough electoral cycle because turnout for Democrats will go back to normal. And because Democrats have a poor electoral strategy, they're going to compound that problem, probably by not appealing to Democrats to get them to the polls." Oops. For all the attention Bitecofer gained since that interview from which that quote was taken, the basic message still hasn't penetrated the Democratic establishment as a whole. So rather than fruitlessly trying to change their marketing, Bitecofer has gone off on her own to work around, and that is what we also in our groups love to see. So to amplify the type of messaging that her research suggests is key to winning elections with today's electorate. So she is now independently consulting with a variety of national and state campaigns with a strong focus on swing states, and we are incredibly lucky, such as Arizona. So I'm going to hand the questions over to Melinda for the first half of the program. I will pick them up a little later, but welcome to everyone.
Well, that's quite the bio. I have no idea where that came from, but it was very interesting. It made me sound good. So,
well, I would argue you make yourself sound good.
Oh.
So thank you so much for joining us today. It's a privilege and honor to have you on. I love to start by asking, what lit your fire? Where does your passion come from on politics and messaging?
Yeah, I mean, really, actually, I guess the fire comes from, all right, I guess no one ever asked me that before. This has been quite the evolution. So I come into grad school in 2009 from Oregon to Georgia, okay? So that's quite the change. And I study American political behavior. So I literally watch the collapse and study it analytically as an academic, the collapse of the Republican Party, which had a series of ideological primaries, not unlike what we're seeing now, that purged out like the normal Republican caucuses over the series of a few elections, and then forced the rest of them to conform to the new version of the Republican Party. And, for me, 2014 was probably the pinnacle cycle. In 2010, I remember just being deeply skeptical. It's my first year of grad school, that the Republican Party could tank the economy, okay? Destroy it. I mean, they blew it up. I mean, now it seems like not so bad because we've had all this other stuff. But at that time, that was the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression, and had totally. So that's issue ownership area number one for the Republican Party, is good on the economy, and then the other thing is good on national defense, and they had blown that out with Iraq, right? So we see the Obama coalition emerge and win. And I remember when I first started to hear Crystal Ball talking about a wave election for Republicans, that I went and I read about. That's, start learning about the midterm effect. And just being deeply skeptical, though, as the cycle went on, because they were like, oh, and they went from 20 seats for Republicans to 40 seats for Republicans. And the final prediction was 60 seats. And I was like, are you kidding me? It's like these guys came into office, they're like, okay, our only agenda item is to destroy this black dude that just won the presidency, even though it's going to cause a lot of pain for a lot of people. And it worked, right? It worked so well. I picked up 63 seats. So that was eye-opening. But in 2014, I remember watching all of the candidates run away from Obama. No one wanted to talk about Obamacare. No one wanted to hang out with President Obama. And these are not candidates. When I say candidates, I mean the consultants that advise candidates, generally speaking, right? And it was at that time I was telling people, and I was just a professor, I had no idea I'd ever do this, have a public face, you know. I was learning to be a professor, actually. And I remember telling my students, I'm like, this is the exact wrong strategy. They should be running on Obamacare and on the top line. It brought insurance to 28 million people, and it wiped out for the middle class. It wiped out pre-existing conditions and all these co-pays. I mean, there's so much to run on, you know, and like, if you don't run on your stuff and your message is, I'm embarrassed to be me and to represent my party, and then the opponent's message is don't vote for them, they're a hot mess, you're not going to win that argument, dude. And Republicans get this. They never, I mean, no matter how much of a shit show they turn into, you never hear them admitting that they're in a shit show situation. And they certainly didn't deliver any of their campaign promises in after the 2016 election. There was two main ones, right, that defined the campaign: repeal and replace Obamacare, build the wall. And yet their turnout, their personal party turnout, went up in 2018, not down. And that's why they did better in the Senate and the governor's map than they were expected to do even under my model. The House, they got shellacked in because of realignment politics and 10 years into the census. And now we guys, that's a wind up, because now what I'm trying to get you to understand is these fundamentals matter a lot. And I was really popular in 18 because I was able to come out in 2017 in Virginia and 18 nationally and say, hey guys, we're going to clean it up. Oh yeah, no, you're way underestimating the size of this cleanup, because we're going to have surge coalitional turnout, which is base Democrats plus independent leaners. And we're going to win the conversion poll big time on the 55-45 split, right? And, you know, now I'm decidedly less popular because I'm running around telling people there are two indicators that go into like the, you know, to the forecast, like Dave Wasserman or Nate Silver or whatever, like me, would use. Two indicators that we can look at that are not noisy in polling, which means they're reliable. They aren't having error issues. And one of them is the generic ballot. So when you ask voters, do you prefer Republicans or Democrats to control Congress in the fall? And that is showing a 2 and 2.5 point constant advantage for Republicans. It needs to be at least a 4-point advantage for Democrats for us to be competitive. And the other thing is the enthusiasm gap. So when we break down polling data about how excited you are to vote, and people say, I'm very excited, then you look at the party crosstab, and you can do it just to the party, or you can sort the indie leaners in, and it doesn't matter which way you do it. Guess what? They have a 10-point enthusiasm advantage, and it's all based on those fundamentals. So I'm running around the 51-18 swing state map to try to get as many people to understand they're going to run against us. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be CRT, grooming children. It will not be anything rational. We know that. It will be very electric and emotive. But the message is the same. Fear the Democrats, right? And I'm trying to get people to understand is that we must run a referendum message campaign on the Republican Party. We need every group, no matter what its issue area is, to be running framed messages that flick the attention on the Republicans. And if we don't do that, we have very little chance of survival on a midterm cycle, which is, by the way, dealing us the double blow of inflation and a potential recession.
Yeah. So CEBV is a nonpartisan group, but one of our core messages is, and we're the only indivisible group in Arizona that focuses on the state legislature, because state politics has so much power here for our local lives. And one of our core messages is that we need a new legislature that will actually represent regular folk. And I do think that you are right, that this election is a referendum, because Republicans have a trifecta here in Arizona and have had for quite some time. And we can see where they're going with that. So I want to hear you go into a little bit more specific about where the Democratic Party, Democrats in general, are failing at messaging. So Will Rogers once said, "I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat." So what is the alternative doing wrong?
Yeah, I mean, so I got to say, there of all the adages, that's the one that annoys me the most, right? Here's a party full of organizers who have managed to convince themselves they're incapable of organization, right? Like, wow, what a thing, right? So, I mean, number one, and number two, when Will Rogers said that quote, the strength of the party lied in the South. Okay, so we really need to let that go and think about. The message. The problem is centralization, though. I mean, and a lot of people now are familiar with this concept that the Republican Party is this ideological party, and we're all this groups, and they're, but that, as a political scientist, like I get, it's frustrating because I know in my own work I have to be very careful about this. The public does not understand what that means, though. It doesn't mean like the Republicans are no group and all ideology. The Democrats have no binding ideology, right? And what we have been doing, and I think this is the worst thing that we did, and another reason why we're 10 years down the hole, is we decided, okay, what we need to do is make individualized messaging that's focused down as micro as possible to individuals, to recipients, right? And on these niche issues. At the same time, the Republicans are like, look, let's tell Latino voters everywhere the same thing. And let's make the theme fear the Democrats, right? So we really want to avoid that. And what I'm pitching liberals on is twofold difficult, okay? I'm number one telling you guys, right now we make messages to persuade us, either to the polls or to persuade us, right? We make messages that would mean moving to us, but not to 85% of the intended target pool, because they're not collectively focused people. They're me-oriented people, and we're not sending them any self-interest material, right? We're always asking them to care about other people. We should be asking them to fear for themselves, right? And then the other thing is to get people to understand, if your issue, your passion is climate change or gun control or women's reproductive justice or racial justice, whatever it might be at this time, they are all threatened by the same thing. And that is a radicalized Republican Party that's collapsing into fascism. So now is a time where I do think there's potential for us to come up with a message that is referendum style. Nobody on the left runs that, so I have to help people come up with that. But once I teach people to start thinking in this way, they take it and they go. And I'm starting to train people in this. But what we want to do is try to get all the groups together to and here's our other hitch. It's like we want, and this made sense. If you live in Canada, this makes perfect sense. If you want to get policy done, how do you get policy done? You make it popular, right? How do you make it popular in America? You make it nonpartisan, intentionally nonpartisan, right? And so we did that for 10 years. It was like, okay, if we can just make gun control popular, climate change action popular, whatever popular, then we will be able to we'll force Republicans into action. And if we were in a healthy, functional democracy, that's a totally viable strategy. Turned out we are deploying and launching that strategy over the same decade that the Republican Party is collapsing into radicalism. There is no honest opposition, right? So when we tell the electorate, we're going to elect Democrats, we're going to send them to Congress, they're going to get all this shit done, and then they can't do it because there's no honest opposition, Like we're setting ourselves up for a depressive effect in every cycle, number one. And number two, by doing this intentionally bleach. Katie, I'm on a message call and I told you I was going to be, put the dogs back in the room, okay? Sorry, my son has autism. It's going to take just a second for me to redirect him. I'll be right back.
No worries. We are a dog and kid friendly Zoom.
Did you actually try?
Yeah, it's all charged. Come on. I did. But listen, Hammy, kids, come on. In. Everyone in. I know, but listen.
One thing we've all learned over these past 3 years is that life happens when we least need, want, or expect it to. So no worries whatsoever.
Yeah, he's, with autism, it's harder for them to understand. Like,
Sure.
they don't take subtlety. So anyway, so yes, like what I want to advocate for, I mean, it's constricting, be honest, to have everything that's working on the left in this nonpartisan space, because what we need, when you show up and you tell voters, we need to get people who represent us, they're not understanding that, right? And the strategy that we did to make things popular made sense in Canada, but now what we have is really popular shit that we cannot enact. And so what we should do, or we endeavor to do in whatever, maybe not your organization, but wherever we can, is to repart it. Now we want to wedge stuff. So like, when we think about how Republicans wedge stuff, what do they do to it? They make it partisan, right? So like that's how you wedge an issue. We've never run a wedge issue campaign. So what we want to start doing is running on policy under a makers and takers, or have and can't have, frame, and start telling people, look, we have this policy need and these people will not give it to us until we roll over them. That's how the right did it. And look what they're about to do. Invalidate our constitutional liberty.
So Arizona, as you know, is a state of thirds. We are roughly 1/3 Democratic registered voters, 1/3 Republicans, and 1/3 independent voters. So tell us how you think this message lands with swing voters, with independents and Republicans who are horrified at what's happening, and how we appeal to them best.
My expectation is it will be very effective, right? I mean, and like, here's the thing that drives me nuts. There's a few consultants out there peddling research. Oh, look, Democrat people don't like negative messaging. Okay, well, why does it work in the same swing voter pool when they give them their version of messaging? Why is it so effective, right? So there's a difference between fear and emotion and threat don't work, and I don't feel comfortable doing. Okay, those are two different problems, and we should be careful not to conflate them. So in the Republican system, there is no persuasion message and no mobilization distinction. It's one message. Again, CRT, they're going to turn your kid, they are going to make your kids feel bad for being white. That's what CRT means. Socialism means they're going to take all your shit, right? They're broadly ambiguous things that are nebulous in the voters' minds, so the voter can personalize them. And it's always about us, right? Us. None of our messaging talks about Republicans. And even when we do dwell in that, we try to use code names: corporations, Congress, politicians, big pharma, the gun lobby, right? And what we really mean is the opponents, the opposition party. So, my argument is we make no distinction. The message is the same. If you vote for Republicans, your life will fall apart, right? I mean, that's what swing voters need to have change, which they have a bias towards this cycle, invalidated.
Yeah, here in Arizona, people love to talk about the legislative majority, which is and has been Republican for decades. So I hear what you're saying. And one thing that often doesn't get through is these myths that our legislative Republican majority has built up around itself, such as that they are the party of fiscal prudence.
Right. Well, it's really easy to do when there's no opponent to hold you to the truth, right?
Right.
And when
so how do we undermine that myth?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have to name it and shame it, right? I mean, so that's the constriction of this nonpartisan approach. It is the exact counter opposite of the messaging that we need to do, because when you talk about legislative majorities, Kathy and Kristen, and these are just the names that I can see, understand exactly what you mean. but the person that you're talking to at the door or on a direct mail or in an ad, they have no fucking idea what you mean. Yep. So yeah, they have no idea. They are not your average end target respondent out there does not know who Adam Schiff is, right? I mean, may not know who Mitch McConnell is, may not know that. Okay, so we really need to keep the end user in mind and say, am I making it as easy as the GOP does for them to identify villain? Am I including 5 villains? Because the Republican Party usually relies on one, us, right? So like whatever the mechanism is, if it's BML or critical race scholars or whatever the fuck, right? It's always the Democrats, not some Democrats, not particular Democrats, though sometimes they'll put the images of AOC in because they've made them the squad, the face of lunacy. But they always tie it back directly to the Democratic Party. And what they're doing with that is branding. They're branding in the minds of the voter. Democrats are a mess. Democrats are extremists. They're much better at branding us as extremists than we are. We ran hardly any ads about extremism in 2020, and they ran an extensive catalog of it. And you saw what happened in these down ballot races, which is, by the way, the catalyst for me to have moved into direct electioneering was realizing, if we can't win when the fundamentals are the best we've ever had, and we have an incumbent president that's murdering through negligence and incompetence thousands of people a day, how are we going to sell a message when we're the incumbent party and the world we're living in is a natural shit show? There's things we can't control, but there are other elements of this shit show that are part of the product design of the Republican Party. I mean, it's their strategic point is to deny us of oxygen and victory. Can you go hit mute on the TV? Excuse me.
I didn't even touch a button. The next time you actually talking to
Sorry, guys. It's summer, so.
We get it. We get it. I've got 2 teenagers. Fortunately, they're both asleep. So
Yeah.
is there
Camp starts
anybody,
next week, so.
is there anybody on the progressive side that you feel is doing this or is doing a good job that maybe we could look to emulate?
Oh man, in terms of messaging, no, like I'm hoping to make this state one of the shining examples of the states that I'm working with. And my goal is to be able to shield up every state, because honestly, I mean, I want to help Arizona, and it's really, really important that we do, but this is part of a national threat, right? So this map all goes together, and my efforts in Arizona are not alone. So what I'm wanting to do is to say to the grassroots, like the titans of the grassroots, right? This is what we need to do. We need to have a command summit with heads of these groups. We need to centralize a message. We need to build out a Latino program that's very intensive in terms of voter contact in field, radio, and digital. Okay, in addition, because if we do not do those things this time, you guys are going to lose the state, and you may well lose Mark Kelly's seat in the process.
Yeah. So tell us why Arizona is so important.
Well, I mean, Arizona and Georgia are going to be very tough to hold, okay? Because in this realignment map, the reason I was so bullish on Arizona flipping in 2020, that I started talking about it a year before, is because when realignment meets good fundamentals, and you get the bump, right? So what you saw was Virginia move out of competition, Colorado move out of competition because they were lean blue states, okay? And then Arizona and Georgia moved into competition because they were lean red states and they became swing states, okay? Now you guys have the opposite problem. The demographics have you swing, and that's exactly what a third is. Every state that's like you has a third, almost, okay? The Northeast has some distinction. So the third, right? And sorry, the dogs are distracting me. What was I saying right there?
Why is Arizona so important was the question.
So because it's moving to lean red this cycle, because the fundamentals are pushing it that way, it is, number one, if we don't hold Arizona, we may not hold the West at a time where I think regionalism could matter a lot. Okay. And number two, we need Kelly. This is what I think. I think you guys are in danger of losing Mark Kelly's seat. I think the Kelly campaign will be overconfident. The polling will overestimate his robustness, because at the end of the day, it's all about the percent of voters that turn out and the percent of partisan voters in that percent. So in Virginia, you got high turnout still, but Republicans reached presidential turnout in some of their precincts, guys. So it's not just about the overall turnout, it's which side coalition hits that. Everything in the data tells us the Republicans are going to have more coalitional turnout in the natural state of things. God knows what happens when that natural fundamental is juiced with effective strategy, which it will be, because it will be done by Republicans. Okay. And so we must try out of the box. We must assume that we are down 3 touchdowns, that we must play an unusual football game here, or we are really going to be in trouble.
So I want to lift up how well you're doing with all these distractions of staying focused, staying on message. And it reminds me a lot, honestly, of watching the Arizona State Legislature, where they throw every distraction in the book at you. And it's our job to stay focused and stay messaged. So thank you for modeling that for us. And I'm hoping you have just a little bit of energy, because you are the master of the pivot. And we have been teaching our volunteers to pivot all along. So I want to throw some messaging at you that we have heard out there and get your response to those.
That'd be fun. Let me put the dogs back in the room now. Come on. Come on. Yeah, you know what? You interrupted my meeting like 3 times.
This is all of our lives these days.
Now watch me pivot and attack with an autistic kid and a barking dog, ladies.
Love it. Love it. Okay, let's get started.
All right.
Critical race theory. It's teaching my children, I don't want my children exposed to it. It's teaching racism.
Boy, I'm glad you want to talk about things children are being exposed to. How about the psychological torture you're subjecting our children to every year when they have to go in these active shooter drills and worry about getting blown up, right? I have to curtail my answer a little bit here.
Those government schools, they're sexualizing and grooming our children.
I'm so glad that you want to talk about education. Let's talk a little bit about education. Did you know the Republican Party wants to strike all the lessons about slavery and the civil rights movement out of the history classes? Blah, 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 blah. Why don't they trust our students to learn about American history? Don't they like America? Do they hate America? Why don't they want to understand America?
Inflation is out of control. Joe Biden isn't doing anything.
Oh, I'm so glad that you want to talk about Trumpflation, because those Trump tariffs are driving up inflation so much.
The 2020 election was stolen, and we refuse to let that happen again.
I'm glad you want to talk about the Republican Party's intra-level, multi-state coup conspiracy to end American democracy.
I'm sensing a theme here. The United States was founded on Christian principles. I can't vote for a godless Democrat.
Yeah, because nothing says Jesus more than let's lock up migrant children and make them orphans.
The radical left, this is one I've heard this week. The radical left is disregarding our nation's founding morals and values in favor of normalizing perversion, like subjecting kids to the inappropriate sexual behavior of drag shows. We have to protect our children.
We certainly do. We don't want our 12-year-olds getting any ideas about interesting sexual options right before the Tennessee legislature marries them off to the Republican politician to avoid jail.
Democrats just want to tax and spend, and I can't support that.
Oh, my favorite. You want to talk economics? Let's talk economics, friend. Let us tell the voters here in this beautiful debate all about the story of Reaganomics and how the Republican Party destroyed the American middle class. We can still see the world's greatest middle class, my friends, because it's in Canada, not here. And the Republican Party is the one that outsourced our middle class to Canada. I could go on for hours about the infrastructure, how they destroyed our American supremacy. You really want to put a lot of jingoism in there because these fools have conceded true patriotism, small p patriotism, and national pride, and we should be seizing it every chance we can get.
But Rachel, what about immigration? We have immigrants flooding across our open borders, bringing disease and terrorism.
This is my favorite one because you should ask Donald Trump why the hell his wall didn't stop all the diseased immigrants from flying into the country. Wasn't he supposed to build the wall? Where's your wall? Oh, look at this giant fucking hole in your wall and all the immigrants lined up at it. Why is Trump walls? Why did Trump build his wall with a hole? Is he trying to let immigrants into the country? Do you see how this works?
Well, the Second Amendment, it's critical to our freedom and safety, and Democrats want to destroy, they want to take our guns. They want to destroy the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I know. I think it's really interesting that my Republican opponent here is so ready to defend the rights of rapists and killers and not our children and women.
But speaking of children, our children are losing the values and morals we treasure as Americans. And you know, we have to vote for Republicans so that we can keep our values and morals.
Yeah, I really can't wait till the Republicans take over the entire education system, install cameras in every classroom, and inflict on our children the same Nazi curriculum the Germans used in the 1930s. I'm particularly looking forward to where I have to guard what I say to my husband over coffee for fear that my child's going to turn into a Republican Nazi narc.
But, you know, the cure for all of this is school choice. Parents need to have the freedom to send their kids to whatever school they wish. That means funding for whatever school they wish, because parents should choose what's best for their children, not the government.
Oh, I'm so glad, because, you know, when Republicans talk about school choice or parental control, I always want to make sure that people understand what they mean by that. They mean their choice and their control over your kids.
That was fun.
All off the top of the head.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. The point is, though, guys, I mean, it's not that I haven't thought about it. Like, I'm working on a pivot and attack guide too. So, but here's the thing is like, so like, let's pretend, ask me another one, Melinda, if you've got another, or ask me the same one that you asked before, ask me and I'll show you how we do it now.
Okay, so since you were so happy about the immigration one, I'll throw that back at you, that immigrants are flooding across our open borders. What did I say? Bringing disease and terrorism.
Right. So the way that a traditional anyone, our pundits, our analysts, our media people, our candidates.
That's not true.
Yeah, like, well, that's
Right.
actually not true. And actually, this is what's happening at the border, and they're going to have to talk about the human rights elements and da 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 da. And here's why that's bad, guys, because if I do that, what is the topic of the conversation? The main topic, it's us. It's intra-focused, and we want it out. We want it them. So it may seem pithy, and there's lots of ways to politely pivot and attack, which is something I want to train candidates on, because not everyone's Adrian Fontes, who I call the Fetterman of the West, right? Not everyone's like that and comfortable with combativeness. So like I have a whole series too, which is what I call my bless your heart pivots and attacks, which seem much more genuine, but they do the same thing. The point is the rest of the conversation's about them, and it's informing the recipient of the information of how fucking nuts they are, right? And like that's what's missing more than anything in our system. So I'm glad, Melinda, that you thought to do that. And it's hard because what we want as liberal, they know how we operate and they manipulate us, okay? They know how the news system operates. The Barr memo is like the best example ever of how strategic the Republican Party is in terms of media manipulation, right? Put out a report before the report that lies about the report, and the media will be like, hey, let's just tell everybody the lie, right? So they know how we act, and they know our disposition is to substance, right? So they lead us into that. They know if they attack us on CRT, we will not be able to resist the urge because we're right on the merits. We're right on the ethics. We're right on the morals. We're right on the facts. And they know we can't fucking resist that lecture, right? So it is literally part of their strategy to get us talking and explaining. And what I need to teach people to do is say, no, no, no. Just resist the urge. Like if you want to talk, have good substance debate, do it somewhere else. If it's voter facing, it's about public relations. And we aren't treating it like that.
And it is hard for the folks on this call. So many of the volunteers on this call are the kindest, most caring folks that I know. And it goes against their fundamental grain to come back with an attack.
Exactly. Exactly. And they know that. And it is by far, everyone listening to my voice now, the best weapon they have is that we don't want to accept that we don't want to do things that are uncomfortable to our own natures. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I would not be asking you to do so if I did not wholeheartedly believe that we are on the cusp of much greater pain for people than having to step out of a comfort box in terms of messaging.
Mm-hmm. And I do believe that you are right. I have employed some of this messaging in my own conversations with lawmakers over the past couple of months, and I have watched as it has been shockingly effective.
Yay! Well, that's great.
Mm-hmm. So, talking about education with our allies in the legislature, all I have to mention is the new Turning Point school that is opening, and is this something that we feel that we should be morally supporting? And if we get as the Republicans want universal vouchers for all children, then we're instantly we're flooding the Turning Point Academy with state tax dollars. And is that something that we should morally support?
Yeah.
So
an attack. I mean, here they want, arming teachers, right? In a system where we were all trained, that they could have never gotten away with something that's stupid. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So we really need to fix our comms. I'm a big believer in Eleanor Roosevelt, who is, by the way, one of my feminist heroes, right? The only way to begin is to begin. We can sit here for the next 20 years and talk about how hard it will be to do, or we could just get fucking going.
There is something incredibly liberating about adopting your messaging style, I have to admit. And it's been personally enjoyable also.
Oh, well, that's really great, Melinda. It would help too, if you said something about that on Twitter, I'll send it out, because I'm convinced if I can't get into every swing map, and that includes these weirdo races that we dropped in Cali, we're going to be in real trouble. And the stakes are so incredibly high. They are especially
so
for
high.
You guys and your Latino population, who has no idea what's coming for them. They don't know what's coming.
I'm going to pass it over to Kathy now, who has some much more Arizona focused questions. Okay. And then after that, we have some Q&A that we'd like to do that's come from our audience. So
Great.
Kathy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Melinda. As you know, Rachel, we focus on Arizona state politics, and there's a lot of, national events, obviously, that influence us. But what is it that you have found in Arizona that is unique or different from other swing states?
Yes, so Arizona has an ace card, in my opinion, and it's Latino population, because you guys managed to flip the state, and don't take this the wrong way, because I know a lot of work has gone into what has been accomplished in Arizona, but it's not sufficient, right? So we know there's untapped potential within the Latino voter pile, both in terms of turning out voters who will vote for us and in either stumping or stopping this brand loyalty wedge that the Republicans are throwing in. They're hunting our Latino voter files all across the country along education. Okay, so like that, they're doing what they did to white voters to non-educated minority voters, because what happens is, in college education or not, is not a perfect predictor. There's going to be people who are fine with no education, but there is a definite correlation between having a college degree and being somewhat inoculated to the crazy. Okay, and this is on the left and the right. So people who are not well educated are more suggestible to propaganda and to psychological manipulation. So they are hunting on the Latino voter file, and they're not selling them, hey, vote for Republicans because we're this. They're selling them on the Democrats are socialists who want to turn your boy children into girls, right? So we really need to have we have to up the effort and sophisticate it and centralize it. But we also got to make sure the message, the most important part, anytime you get an eyeball on something, it's worth so much. We want to make sure it's optimized.
Mm-hmm. What I'd like to do is dig into the question that I think is really most critical to us as a group and to the state, which is in the Politico interview, you said about the 2020 election around 7 o'clock, it was clear that Biden was going to win the presidency, with the Midwest swinging back to Democrats. But it was also becoming increasingly apparent that Democrats had delivered a tremendous underperformance down ballot.
Yes.
I am really terrified of that happening again. How can we turn that around?
Yeah, I mean, geez, God. And that was like election night, you know, I was like, okay, they didn't do any of the things that I hoped they would do, you know, after 16, after 17, after 18, after Virginia 2019. And that was it for me. Like watching, I could see quickly that we had a problem down ballot. I mean, and it tempered the joy of beating Trump, that and knowing they were already in the progress of the coup, big lie, and no one would take it seriously at that point. And so you know, the reason we're performing down ballot wrong is we have the wrong electoral strategy, the wrong targeting system, and the wrong messaging system. So that when I left a Build Strike Pack, I was like, okay, we have a targeting and messaging issue. But now I've come to learn the whole system is bad, and the Republicans treat everything under one theme. So what I want to try to get Michigan and you and Florida and all these places to do is run messaging that's referendum style against Republicans that comes from the school board all the way up, right? And that we should be building our political power each cycle up from the weakest links up to the statewide, which are the easier lists, right? Yeah. So you're only as strong as your weakest precincts. And in Virginia, I was like, this is what they're going to do. And I told you that they reached presidential turnout and they have the fundamentals. And so we should paint for the electorate the picture of Glenn Youngkin's a modern Republican, and modern Republicans are chaos, right? And we should build our targeting, our digital, our grassroots, all of it up from the state legislative level up to the governor's race, right? And so like ultimately long term, that's what my vision is, that we stop seeing running the candidate-centered campaigns that we run now, where everything's decentralized. I mean, Fetterman and Shapiro will probably run together, but maybe if Shapiro didn't like Fetterman, they wouldn't. Or thought he was too radical and they wouldn't, you know, like that's so stupid. We need everything rolling together, one theme to make a cacophony of noise. And that theme is fear the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know we have a lot of school board candidates because I've seen on this call, because I've seen them introducing themselves in the chat, and I'm sure we have legislative and other candidates as well. So what do you consider to be the best investment in time and money for these candidates to do. Obviously, some of the down ballot races do not have a lot of money. So what do you think is the most effective thing for them to do?
Especially at the school board level, I would steal parental control, and then I would attack the Republicans. They're trying to steal your kids, take over your kids' education and indoctrinate your children. I think that's a really effective messaging for suburban parents. They're not going to like it, and it makes it sound as equally scary as what the Republicans are going to be arguing, which is the same thing.
Great. So what is I know you've been lending a tremendous amount of urgency to, all of your conversations and all of the messaging that you generate. I follow you very closely on Twitter, and amplify as much as I can. What is the best way to get people off the sidelines? I mean, turnout.
Yeah, I mean, I saw somebody, I can't read every chat thing that pops up, but I saw one, and it was, mentioning the fatigue, and that's the fundamental. Like, we know they're fatigued because, and I told you, or could have told you, did probably on Twitter in December of 2020. Now the entire Democratic base is going to deflate. They're going to think a big chunk of the presidential coalition is going to think, oh, thank God, that crazy guy is gone. Everything's good now. And that's all they'll ever know unless we tell them something else. And that stands today, guys. Like, we have to tell those people you're still under threat and make them feel the threat, because right now they don't feel the threat. They don't follow the news. They don't know who Nancy Pelosi is. Don't care. And all they see is the top line stuff. So we need to do something to generate enthusiasm. Roe being eviscerated is going to be a massive intervening variable. There's very few things that could intervene in this, but that could. And the reason is that it's going to hit these trigger laws right away. You guys are in a trigger law state, and it's going to create total fucking pandemonium. And then the news cycle is going to pick up on those pandemoniums. It's going to pick up on these one or two people that have exceptions where they're going to die if they don't get out of the state. I mean, it's a huge opportunity, and we really want to make sure people understand we don't need to message down in the weeds about Roe. We don't even need to make it about reproductive freedom. They are going to make us unequal citizens. Women will be 50% of men under the law. Okay, we don't have a constitutional right to control our own bodies. That's the message that will freak people out. I do think there's ways to bring home the abortion, the reproductive elements. You want to make parents feel like their teenage daughter isn't going to be able to get an abortion, or they're going to go to jail if they help her, or, they're going to die themselves because they have cancer and they need an abortion. That's the kind of personalized fear or motive ads the GOP would use to make it real, because otherwise you're talking about abstraction. And certainly if you're talking about, oh, poor women and women of color aren't going to have access. It's not that I'm not sensitive to that. That is the fact. The fact is, these laws are going to hurt poor women and women of color more. But if we want to win the fucking politics, we can't be talking about poor women and women of color. We got to make women feel it for themselves and their own in-groups, their own families. It can't be about other people. Hey, this terrible thing's going to happen to other people. It has to be about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, to sort of build on that point, one of the themes that I have felt that is pervasive in the type of messaging that you're talking about, and also the, all of the context of today, is appealing to emotions rather than intellect. And I really do think that Democrats fall into that trap. They often think, if I just march out more facts, or if I just say them louder, I will be able to convince people. But it sounds to me like you're saying, people vote on emotion.
Yeah.
Is that?
And people have a fifth grade reading. 50% of the country has a fifth grade reading level. Okay. Mm-hmm. The naive realism that plagues us is so profoundly bad. And that is, by the way, we're able to appreciate nuance in the world, that people are different, but we can't really, not psychologically. Mm-hmm. Psychologically, we cannot believe that 90% of the people out there walking around with us don't give a flying fuck about the government. Okay. They don't know anything about it. They aren't paying attention to any news. If it's a mass shooting, they'll hear about it. Tornado wipes out 150 people. Maybe that will get through. The Roe evisceration didn't break through, or the Roe memo leak didn't hit the main bandwidth. The main bandwidth is very, very hard to hit. Okay. And what's the main bandwidth right now, guys? All should be able to tell me right now. It's inflation, 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 right? It's very hard to penetrate the norms because we are not normal. So we need to make our messaging. And when we look at it, we should be asking ourselves a couple of things. Is the villain clearly identifiable? And is it the Republican Party? And am I making that explicit where possible? Number two, have I written this as in as simplest words as possible, right? So, no fancy SAT words, right? And then at the end of the day, is it in a glance? Because if it's not in a glance and I actually have to take time to read it, then I'm going to lose a good chunk of the people who might have seen the message. You really need to make everything, the important part anyway, in a glance, because that's all you have for most messaging. You've got the first 5 seconds of an ad before they can hit skip ad. You've got the glance when I take a postcard out of the mail. Now, keep in mind, guys, like this will help you understand naive realism a little bit. You get your flyer from Katie Hobbs and you're like, oh man, let me look at this thing. Oh yeah, okay. Most people, think about how you behave when you get one from the grocery store or the local hardware store, though. That you don't do that. You pick it up, you look, and you're like, oh, that's a hardware store thing, and then you throw it, right? So the message has to be right there, and it's got to pop in a glance because those are the people that we have to hit, not us.
Great. Well, I think I'm ready for sort of one last question, and then I will go to ask Kristen to wrangle a few questions from our audience. Can we win in Arizona without ever mentioning Donald Trump again?
No. But you can't just do what Glenn Youngkin does, throw some ads up like, Youngkin's like Trump. Why should I care if I'm a voter, right? It's got to be Trump. Trump is useful in that you should be defining all Republicans as Trump. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what they do with Obama. That's what they do with AOC. That's what they do with Pelosi. That's what you can't do it with Biden. He's kind of weird, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to define all Republicans as Trump. So, but it's not about Trump. It's not about Trump's character, the wacky shit that he says. It's about his potential to disrupt your target audience, the voter, their health, their wealth, or their security, or all three.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Kristen, if you want to unmute and see if there are there some questions in the Q&A that we can.
You guys have all been so great rolling with my interruptions, so thank you for that.
Oh, yeah,
I actually try not to I mean, it is what it is, and we're trying to redefine work, and I'm trying to save democracy, and I have an autistic kid, so
Yeah. Yes.
Well, we're so glad that you're here today. There are several questions, so I'm going to try and pick some that have like common themes. There are a few about motivating volunteers. Again, it comes back to that fatigue that I think you mentioned, and it was in the chat, or feeling like they're not in a blue district, so they might not win. Do you have any advice on getting people to start doing something?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume the calls are going something like this. Hey, we're calling to see if you can volunteer for the Katie Hobbs campaign. Oh, I did all that stuff in 2020 and like it totally didn't make any difference and right? I mean, that's the problem that we're facing. And what people need to understand is that's not an accident. That's the entire point of their obstruction strategy. That's the heart of it, was deny Democratic presidents, now Biden, then Obama, legislative victory to depress its coalition, right? And so what I would say to you is if I'm calling volunteers, they're despondent and angry, and they have been told because of our system to be self-angry. It's all about Manchin and Sinema and It's all inward focus. What we want to do is redirect these people's outrage, right? You don't have that shit because the Republican Party will not give it to you. Right? You had $600 a month for your 2 kids to deal with inflation, and the Republican Party took it from you. Right? That's not technically true. That's not specifically accurate, but it's true. So it's going to I don't give a shit. It's about half true on PolitiFact. I'm not trying to win PolitiFact. I'm trying to win hearts and minds, guys. Right? So hyperbolic to say it the other way, less technically specifically right, but still technically right, right? So we need to do that. We need to make our rhetoric, the goal is to win a campaign, not an accuracy war.
Thank you. So I know you've talked about this as well, but there continue to be a lot of questions coming up with abortion and messaging, particularly in Catholic communities. And as you've mentioned, the Latino community, there are many Catholics that kind of overlap. So,
yep.
Yeah,
no, I'm hitting all the women I possibly can with, you're going to have your rapist baby, or your daughter is going to be sentenced to, it's a state sanctioned death sentence. If I'm told I have to get rid of my pregnancy and get medical treatment, and the state of Texas, the Republican Party, the state of Arizona, the Arizona Republican Party is going to tell me no, that I have to die. That's how we win Catholic voters in the Latino community, same as we would win them in suburban America.
thank you. All right, another theme that I'm seeing here, what would your messaging be around the January 6th hearings and the audit that we've had continuing here in Arizona?
Yeah, that's great, because now we know unequivocally, right? They knew the whole time, they lied compulsively about election fraud, right? So now what you guys should do is go on offense against that Arizona GOP and start accusing them of being involved in a coup. That's what I would do.
All right, a couple more. Do you have centralized information or sites where we can learn details about electoral data?
No, I don't do that anymore, because number one, I don't have time. Number two, I didn't think it was ethically appropriate to make predictions and be electioneering at the same time. And at that point, I was creating a super PAC, right, to try to fund a war machine. I made a war machine, but no funding, and I have no interest in vanity projects. I'm only interested in one thing: moving votes to the polls for us. Okay, moving them to the polls and for us. And see, those things aren't distinct; they are together. So, in any case, this is, so I didn't put out a forecast. I did put out an article on my Substack that talked about the midterm fundamentals and the 2 times in history, especially the most recent in 2002, when they were disrupted. They were disrupted by the disruption of the national narrative and a massive threat to security. And we have that opportunity here. So when we talk about Jan 6, what I want you guys to do is think of yourselves as information ambassadors. Most people will not watch the Jan 6 hearings. They won't watch clips of the Jan 6 hearings. We might get to 50% of the country that will see some primary source material from Jan 6. That means the other 50%, half of that doesn't care, and the other half is never going to look, right? Because they're hardcore Republicans and they just won't look. That's psychologically, when something is painful for you to look at, you avoid it. So they're not, a lot of right-leaning independents and Republicans are avoiding Jan 6. So my point is this: don't get in the weeds, okay? Top line, they made up a lie about election fraud. They conned you out of money to fund it. They tried to overthrow the government. Those are the things that we need people to understand about January 6th.
Okay, I think we've covered most of the sort of general areas. Thank you so much, Kristen. So Rachel, I'd love now in our last minute for you to leave us with some words of hope and optimism about the work that we have to do in Arizona over the next 4 months. We
have everything that we need to win. That's what I'll tell you. Not just here in Arizona, but nationally. We have what we need to win. We could win. We just have to run the right strategy to do it. And so that's why, and strategy, guys, is not tactics. Strategy is the plan that directs tactics, right? So it has to be in place well before the fall. And that's why I've been pushing so aggressively to push strategy as hard as I can, as many ways as I can, in as many crucial swing places as I can. And to answer your question, I actually created this toolkit for the Jan 6 stuff. And it was actually just a beta test. I'm working with a partner who's doing it for free. We want to make it all free, not even like, accept donations. So what we're doing is we made a website that puts memes up, but it's a prototype for what I hope to build, which is going to be a midterm, like, data bank. Okay. And like the goal, the vision I have anyway for it is this. I say I'm running state legislative in Arizona, and from the long shot races all the way to the swing marquees in the Arizona House, which is what your focus is, right? What I want to do is have a site where your candidates can come, they can get direct mail templates, they can get ads, literal political ads, they can get memes for digital grassroots work. And I want people to start thinking about digital grassroots door knocking, because that's what we're doing when we're online, right? We have this opportunity to knock on millions of doors, and we're not thinking it like that. So we haven't designed a toolkit or a strategy for it, but that's part of this project. And then, scripts for the door and stuff like that. And what that'll do is, number one, it solves this resource curse issue for the down ballot, because no matter what, even the swing races in the House are denied what they need, right? So it solves that, but it also does this. It creates a centralized theme that starts to get pounded at the school board, city council, state legislative, federal House, and statewide race level. And that's how you start to cause a cacophony. That's how they did it. That's how we don't have Fox Media. That's always going to be true. It's never going to look like theirs. It's never going to be as easy as theirs. And frankly, we don't want a shit show propaganda network. But there's a lot of stuff in this gray area in between that we can be doing, and we can easily get that going, I hope, with a central hub. And that's what I'm working on now.
Oh, that is so wonderful. I know I've seen a huge amount of appreciation for you, both in the chat, in the Q&A. I think we have covered a huge amount of ground, and with so many different distractions that you've had. So this is our life today. So we appreciate the fact that obviously we deal with everything as it comes up, so I love that window in as well. So Rachel, thank you so much for taking this time with us. We will be broadcasting this webinar on our YouTube channel, and we would love to have you back maybe in September.
Well, please feel free to make sure you tweet at me with your video so I can get it out to a broad audience.
Absolutely. That is great. Thank you.
Let's all go to Jan 6 right now, and you can go to republicantreason.net for all your digital guerrilla grassroots organizing you want.
Great. We'll put that in the follow-up email.
Okay,
Thanks,
guys.
Rachel. Take
Thanks.
care. Bye-bye.